Good evening and welcome to the October 2nd meeting of the Falmouth Conservation Commission. At this time, I'll ask you to please silence all your electronic devices. If you're going to have a private conversation, please take it outside. This meeting is being recorded by FCTV. If there is anyone else recording this meeting, please identify yourself for the record. If you are here to speak on any matter, and we do encourage you to do so, you have to do it from the podium, state your name for the record, speak into the microphone at the appropriate time. Thank you, Peter. Cover everything? I think I did. Other business, review and vote conservation restriction 40 to 740 Terhune Drive.
Evening.
That he's late.
Hi, Courtney. I'm Jessica Rittenauer. I'm the Executive Director of the 300 Committee Land Trust, and our board member Leonard Johnson is joining me this evening as well. Tonight, I'm presenting on the Lowell Woods, which is property that is being donated to the 300 Committee this year, so we expect this gift to happen before the end of 2019. The property will be permanently protected with a conservation restriction that will be held by the Compact of Cape Cod Conservation Trusts. So the presentation tonight, I have a very brief overview of the property and then outlining the municipal certificate that accompanies the conservation restriction when we submit it to the state for approval. The municipal certificate essentially outlines the public benefit of conserving this property for Falmouth. So first and foremost, I want to make clear that this gift of land is from the Lowell family. So Vicki Lowell and her late husband, Pete Lowell, made the decision to donate this land to the 300 Committee. It abuts BB Woods, so it's an extremely rare opportunity for us to preserve additional land with contiguous lot lines with BB Woods. So a really rare, special opportunity. The map here where it says CLTC locus, that stands for Conservation Land Tax Credit Locus. So these maps accompanied the state application. This is eligible for a Massachusetts Conservation Land Tax Credit, which is a higher standard of review actually for conservation restrictions. It meets certain priority habitat and biomap and climate change resiliency standards, so it gives it another special designation. But Lowell Woods, gift of the Lowell family, would be owned by the 300 Committee. I just need to advance. Okay. I just have a couple maps here. So this one here shows you again the outline of the parcel, 7.42 acres. It is within an area that's designated by the Commonwealth Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program. It is 100% of the property is within a priority habitat area. And it also has the blue dots near it are certified vernal pools, so they're not on the property, but it's proximate to several certified vernal pools. This illustration here highlights the prime soils. There are at least two different prime soil types that the state has determined to be high priority, and this property contains two of those. You have a copy of the municipal certificate. This was sent as part of the package, and this is actually the document that requires Conservation Commission signature. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just hitting the 5 highlights. The first one clarifies that it contains more than 5 acres of the prime ag, or not prime ag soils, prime forest soils. It expands public access to the protected open space at BB Woods. It does protect an area that was identified by the Nature Conservancy as being particularly well suited to climate change adaptation. Number 4 is it's protecting the significant habitat. This is the priority habitat that the state designated. And finally, the area is recognized by the Mass Historical Commission as being highly archaeologically sensitive, favored for land use and occupation by ancient and historic period Native Americans. All of this information was compiled with assistance from the Cape Compact of Conservation Trusts. We couldn't do any of these types of land conservation projects without them, because they're a tremendous resource in studying these properties, along with our Land Acquisition Committee and Board, to really evaluate the conservation value and to come to a decision to conserve them. So it's a team effort. I do just want to point out the conservation restriction certainly allows public access. There is encouraged for trails, so we can have trail connections in BB Woods, and there's reserved rights for benches and resting areas such as that. I would be happy to entertain any questions on the contents of the municipal certificate or the conservation restriction.
That's it?
This is 300 committee land, but the restriction will be held by
The compact,
Compact.
yes.
Okay.
That's actually a requirement. The Conservation Tax Credit Program requires, even if a land trust holds the land, you need the extra layer of protection with the conservation restriction.
It's a very generous, wonderful thing. Yeah, it's great.
And
Courtney?
I'm just curious, is there specific evidence of something that's archaeologically sensitive, and, or is it a, or is that just sort of, it meets the sort of a set criteria?
I believe it's, yes, set criteria. There's nothing to our knowledge that's been
Okay.
necessarily identified there.
In other words, there's no burial ground or
We don't think so.
village or something that you know is there? Okay, nope. I think it's a great project.
I make a motion to accept the CR. A second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? It is unanimous.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you. And may I ask, Leonard has a comment he wanted to share
Absolutely.
about this, so thank you.
I'm Leonard Johnson. I'm a board member and past president of the 300 Committee. I'd just like to make two observations. One is, when somebody gives us a piece of property, it is our policy to put a conservation restriction on it so that the donor knows that the property will always be conserved. In other words, a future board can't sell this for development. Not that the board would, but that's a protection that we provide to our donors so they can be sure if they make a gift to us, that it will always be protected as open space. The second is about, Pete and Vicky are examples of the wonderful type of people we have in this town who contribute in so many ways, including those of you on this board. This is a very personal piece of property for them. Pete used to walk his dog up behind the house, first Boris, who's always my favorite dog, and then every day, and then Molly after him, after Boris. And it seems to me that this is just another example of the wonderful contribution that people like Pete and Vicky have made to this town. Thanks.
Nice.
Very generous.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, and I'm sorry I was remiss. I'd like to welcome our newest member, Susan Warren. Welcome.
Thank you.
Next up, vote minutes, September 25th.
I read them, and I found them to be correct.
Second.
Anybody have anything they want to add to it? All right. We have a motion and a second.
This is the 25th, correct?
That is correct.
You haven't been here for 2 weeks. Oh, I'm sorry. I take that back. I'm on the 18th. I retract my motion. I wasn't here for the 25th.
Good one,
Yeah.
Lord.
I'll make the motion to accept.
It's okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second for the 25th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Next up is request for determination of applicability. Manuel Gonzalez, 223 Edgewater Drive West, East Falmouth, Mass., for permission to crib the existing house and pour a concrete foundation on the same footprint.
Mr. Chairman, staff recommends a -2 under the state and bylaw, and resource area boundaries are not confirmed under this RDA.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? It is unanimous. Next up are continued hearings under a notice of notice of intent. All hearings of the Falmouth Conservation Commission are held simultaneously under the authorities of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision of the commission is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. First up is Kevin and Carolyn Osgood, 70 Ostrom Road, Falmouth, Mass. For permission to construct a single-family house with attached garage, deck, driveway, Title V septic system, retaining walls, mitigation plantings, and all associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping.
May I read the quorum?
Please do.
Quorum is Courtney, Kevin, Maury, Betsy, Jamie, Russ, Steve, and Peter.
Betsy, could you do that one more time, please?
Yes. Courtney, Kevin, Maury, Betsy, Jamie, Russ, Steve, Peter.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I may go now. For the record, my name is Tom Bunker with BSS Design,
Oh, she can ask questions.
and I have here tonight also Teresa Sprague, Blue Flax Design, and Kevin and Carolyn Osgood are here also. So we'll answer any questions we have. Or you have, I should say. This hearing was continued several times after one initial hearing. And now, we're back. We've made some changes to the plans based on your comments from before and addressed some issues. And then Teresa added a vegetation management plan and planting plan for this area. So basically what I did on the site plan around the house, changed the septic system configuration to gain more room and move the house about 4 feet uphill away from the resource areas, and that got it a little bit more out of the outer riparian zone. That's the 200-foot line, which is right here, 200 feet from the riverfront area, the outer riparian zone. So we moved it up, got more of the house outside of that, and could expand the limit of work on the sides where there was not 10 feet. I'd say there still is not 10 feet right here at the base of these stairs, but I think that certainly can be worked around. That is, there's a large deck. Vehicular access during construction, if necessary, can come in this way. And certainly for future maintenance of the project, stairs and scaffolding, or rather ladders and scaffolding, are just put up on the deck to reach the upper levels. So we don't necessarily need 10 feet of work area right here. But everywhere around the main part of the house, we do have the 10 feet. It is just under, the disturbance within the outer riparian zone is just under the 5,000 square feet. Excuse me. We increased the drainage capacity, put more infiltrator chambers down lower around here, so we have an inlet into the drainage system up here on the driveway and pipe down to another drainage inlet to catch this, and then going into the leaching chambers, as we have a drainage inlet at the bottom of the very bottom of the driveway here to catch the water and go into the infiltrator chambers. And he did also add down this driveway, a cobblestone gutter, let's call it, so that this driveway, this area is only 20 feet wide, and it slopes side to side, basically from east to west. It slopes down this way, so I had to put a little gutter line of cobblestones to keep water from going onto the next property downhill. Water already goes across this property downhill, but putting this in will actually decrease the amount of water that might enter the next southern property, Lot 5. So there was that change to the driveway. We have it still shown on this plan as a four-bedroom house. Conferred with the health department, they verified that the other, the four houses which have been built in the subdivision all have 3 bedrooms, and that none of them have an innovative alternative septic system in the area. So they confirmed that, but in a meeting with the planning board, the decision was that this would, the issue of determining that this lot can have 4 bedrooms would have to go through a full subdivision hearing with public notice and advertising and all. So that has not been done. That would take a while, and I understand that this, until the number of bedrooms allowed on this site is determined, you'll not be closing the hearings, or we'll have to request a continuance. So I don't know if I do that now, I guess wait till after
Wait till after.
the
Tom.
comments, but
Yep.
that'll be on there. And so as you can see on this, what this large green area, which was not on the plan before, is the part of the vegetation management plan by Blue Flax Design. I think this is the biggest part, the part that you haven't seen yet or heard presented to you yet. So I think I'll have Teresa address that, and then I guess you can ask questions of both of us afterwards.
Good evening, Teresa Sprague with Blue Flax Design here on behalf of Kevin and Carolyn Osgood. I'm going to put the overall planting plan, land management plan in general, but I'm going to walk through the land management plan, starting with existing conditions and what we discovered on the site. So as you know, this lot was previously developed with a single-family home, which has since been torn down. There's only a small shed or cabin-like structure with an attached deck remaining within Zone B. There's a dirt driveway which leads into the property from Ostrom Road, where it turns into a clearing and a network of access paths that run throughout both the wooded and open areas of the property. We discovered clear evidence of long-term ongoing management and disturbance on the site, including mowing and cutting that have been done fairly regularly, at least prior to the past year, as evidenced by regrowth of woody vegetation, including oaks, pitch pines, and northern bayberry. In addition to the evidence of cutting and mowing, the site has lingering signs of the previous development and disturbance, including the presence of some invasive species, areas of bare sand where vegetation has been regularly trafficked over, and brush and yard waste and dump piles. The previous management has had multiple effects, both positive and negative. Obviously, the negative effects have mainly been damage to the trees through continuous cutting and pruning with poor pruning practices. Of course, that makes them more susceptible to disease, keeps them from reaching mature fruiting size. The positive effects, however, have been that some mowing has been happening, and that has maintained habitat and species diversity through both a mix of open native grass-dominated areas as well as woody thicket vegetation. So it really creates and maintains a dynamic edge habitat in the site. So despite the ongoing management without the best benefits of best practices, the early signs of invasive species infestation, native species diversity on the site actually remains quite high. And can be restored with proper management practices. We did note on the edge of the salt marsh, between the upper salt marsh and upland areas, is being invaded by Phragmites reed, mixed in with some eastern groundsel, bush, baccharis. The south of the upper salt marsh zone, the salt marsh quickly transitions into healthy, robust salt marsh grasses that provide significant wildlife habitat value, as well as crucial floodwater protection for this site. The management plan that we're proposing seeks to maintain and improve upon the aspects of the ecosystem functionality that are working, and to manage and improve upon those that are not, to create a more fully functional and healthy natural landscape. We've broken the management areas down into the two areas that we've identified on the site. We have the area shown in green, which we're calling Management Area 1. The existing conditions is that this is basically an oak pitch pine plant community. It's dominated by semi-disturbed open grassland habitat, characterized by dry, low-nutrient, acidic soils. Vegetation includes black huckleberry, low bush blueberry, as well as herbaceous layers, including Pennsylvania sedge, Gaultheria, Deschampsia, crinkle hairgrass, purple lovegrass, little blue stem, and a mix of goldenrod species. The area has been mowed at least annually, perhaps with greater frequency for some time, as evidenced by the species diversity and resurgence pattern of previously suppressed woody vegetation. So there are areas of wide bare vegetation, which has likely been caused by human disturbance, including foot traffic, picnic tables, Adirondack chairs, which indicate the regular use of the property has been ongoing. There are mature canopy-sized oak and pitch pines found throughout this management area, as well as the entire property, providing leaf and pine needle depth to areas below. In the eastern portion of the property, this area in here, there's a large area that on first glance appears to be just an open bare area, but on a more in-depth study, and we've provided some photographs in our land management plan, it's actually quite a diverse area of species composition. It contains numerous resprouting woody species, including bayberry and oak sprout stumps and seedlings, as well as bearberry, wintergreen, huckleberry. The oak and stump sprout and seedlings currently range from 3 to 10 inches tall in this area. And there's photographs provided of that on page 4 and 5 of our land management plan. The other management area that we are calling out here is Management Area 2, and this is shown in blue on this plan here. So in addition to the dominant oak pitch pine canopy found throughout the lot, the Management Area 2 supports vegetation consistent with maritime shrubland plant communities. So there's diverse ground cover species, similar to that found in Management Area 1, as well as a dense mid-canopy shrub layer existing throughout. High bush blueberry, black chokeberry, northern bayberry, beach plum, pasture rose, sweet fern, winged sumac, huckleberry, witherod viburnum, as well as catbrier and poison ivy. It's really a beautifully diverse thicket in here. The overstory is, again, primarily oak and pitch pine with red maple, some eastern red cedar, black cherry, and serviceberry found throughout the area. Most of the trees, however, growing into this area are, as an understory, are currently sapling-sized trees, which appear to have been historically cut to approximately 2 to 4 feet high to maintain views. The cut vegetation has been left in places on the ground and in piles of debris throughout this area. Other areas of dumping have also occurred along the edge of the thicket, so we found evidence of people dumping things like Christmas trees, et cetera, in the area. As I pointed out earlier, Phragmites reed is growing into the transition zone. And then in this area where we have seen more disturbance and regular disturbance, cutting, dumping, et cetera, is where we're also finding invasive plant species beginning to colonize the area, including bittersweet and porcelain berry. Throughout this area, there's a series of paths that crisscross the property and lead down to the water at different points. And there's also a makeshift flagpole on the property. Several of these paths begin on the property but lead onto neighboring properties. So it's very clear that neighboring properties have been using this area fairly regularly and managing it to maintain open spaces as well as views. You can see images that we provided of the cut vegetation on page 7. So our goals and objectives for the land management plan are to increase the protection of the resource areas, enhance the integrity of the buffer zones, and the goals, or the actions to get to those goals will be immediately to cease the previous management activities for views and access throughout the 100-foot inner riparian zone, as well as Zone A and B to the salt marsh and coastal bank, and allow regeneration of previous mowing and cutting areas. to protect that resprouting woody vegetation within the inner riparian zones and A and B zones to the salt marsh and coastal bank, to restore and enhance the naturalized areas using native plant species with high wildlife habitat value, as well as best management practices to support the regeneration of previously disturbed areas, and of course to manage the small, it's less than 10% of the total vegetation in the area, invasive species to eliminate the risk of spread and competition with native plants. And then the second goal, of course, is to provide mitigation for the newly proposed structure as required under both the Rivers Protection Act as well as Falmouth's Wetlands Regulations 10.18 to protect buffer zones. And to do that, we're proposing to plant areas that are currently devoid of woody vegetation and to allow previously cut mowed stump sprout and seedling oaks and pitch pines to naturally regenerate throughout the property to mitigate for the proposed removal of trees to accommodate for the single-family home. The proposed management goals and planting exceeds 310 CMR 10.5843 for the allowance of construction of a single-family house. That regulation requires that the performance standards of 310 CMR 10.584D are met to the maximum extent feasible. This proposed project is designed to meet all of the performance standards by ensuring the area of alteration within the 200-foot riverfront outer riparian zone is less than 5,000 square feet, providing greater than the required minimum 100-foot wide area of undisturbed vegetation. In addition, because the inner riparian zone also overlaps with the A and B zones to the salt marsh and coastal bank, the entire A zone as well as the 100-foot inner riparian zone will also be protected as required under 10.18. We believe that the cessation of mowing, pruning, cutting, and dumping will provide an immediate benefit to the resource area and buffers. Discontinuance of poor management practices, followed by management of invasive vegetation, regenerative pruning, and proper management of regrowing woody vegetation will support the integrity of the critical resource areas. Restoration of woody vegetation in areas devoid of healthy native ground cover and understory will provide additional wildlife habitat value and enhance vegetative structure, including fruits, flowers, and increasing forage cover and breeding habitat. We are proposing, and this is something that, and we do have a table of the tree removal, the proposed tree removal for the structure on page 13, and we can look at that of our land management plan. Of course, under the Falmouth Wetlands Regulations, you require trees to be be replaced either tree for tree or potentially inch for caliber inch. However, in this particular case, we make the recommendation that in order to minimize soil disturbance in support of encouraging regeneration, that the existing native trees that are currently growing on this site, particularly in this southeastern portion of the lot, be allowed to regenerate naturally. There's a significant number of oak and pitch pine seedlings, as well as resprouting previously cut and mowed stumps. And we're making this recommendation based on the fact that we're in support of promoting existing local ecotypes, obviously with genetic codes that have evolved to support the tree's ability to cope with stressors, including salt, high winds, et cetera, that you would find on a site such as this, periods of drought and inundation. Other benefits of allowing these stump sprouts to regenerate naturally and infill is the existing root establishment of these stump sprouts and seedlings. So though these taprooted tree species currently range from 3 to 10 inches tall now, we know that the roots in place are about 3 times that at this point. They're going to grow more rapidly, they don't require fertilizer, they don't require irrigation, and they're going to grow more rapidly than any of their ball and burlap planted counterparts. Their growth will also not impede or disturb the regeneration of other native woody vegetation. So as I pointed out, in this area that has been regularly mowed, in addition to the oak stumps and seedlings resprouting and pitch pines resprouting, there's a significant amount of resprouting bayberry that would be allowed to infill. There's also currently a very healthy ground cover of Pennsylvania sedge, bearberry and Gaultheria and solidagos, et cetera. So I think minimizing disturbance in this area would be the ultimate goal in allowing those trees to grow back in. Excuse me. This is a fairly long management plan, and I apologize. So in addition to the resource areas that we've discussed, there's of course the Wacoit Bay ACEC located up to the 100-year floodplain, elevation 13 on this lot. No structure or alteration is proposed within the ACEC. We are proposing to maintain the native grasses that are in this open area through an annual mowing. We believe that it helps create excellent dynamic edge habitat. This is a very important edge habitat along this heavily wooded area throughout the rest of the lot, as well as providing species diversity. I have gotten some information from Jennifer that the commission may not feel comfortable with that, and certainly we can discuss it, but that's our management objective. In addition to that, there's no priority or estimated habitat on the property. There is significant priority and estimated habitat just off property, but none on the property itself. We do go into very specific management protocols for areas 1 and areas 2. Basically, we're just maintaining proposing to maintain what's existing as well as enhance. In addition to that, we are calling out a proposed Vista Corridor Management Area. Again, that's written into the land management plan on pages 10 and 11, meeting a 25-foot wide Vista Corridor, meeting all of the requirements under FWR 10.1810B. If we look on page 13, we can just quickly go over the areas of alteration as well as trees to be removed. You'll see that we're proposing to remove 12 trees within the B zone to the coastal bank, as well as 10 trees within the 200-foot riverfront area for 20 trees total, caliper inches, 222 caliper inches. On the area calculations table that we've provided on page 13, we have additional structure within the 200-foot outer riparian zone of 2,098 square feet. Additional structure in Zone B of 685. Existing structure to be removed from Zone B, which is the shed deck area of 240 square feet for total new structure in the B zone of 445 square feet. That would be a total new structure in the 200-foot outer riparian zone of 2,543 square feet, with a total area of alteration within the 200-foot outer riparian zone of 4,994 square feet. So basically, the 2,098 square feet of structure includes the house, decks, stairs, etc. The 4,094 square feet total area of alteration within the 200-foot outer riparian zone includes area for clearing for limit of work, a 10-foot wide grass strip around the house for access and maintenance, as well as driveway, septic, etc. is all included in that area. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the land management plan. In addition, we did submit an alternatives analysis as is required for projects proposed within the riverfront area. I'm just going to quickly run through those. The alternatives are basically, the first alternative is no change, property remains in its existing condition. The second alternative would be to redesign the scope of the project to eliminate any alteration within the 200-foot outer riparian zone or buffer zone B to the coastal bank. And the third is the project as proposed. Alternative 1, no change. As you know, the property is currently for sale and under contract with the Osgood family. It has been marketed by the listing agent as a buildable lot with building site approved. Where that information comes from, I do not know, but that is how it's being listed and marketed by the real estate agents. The property does have a deed recorded in 1992, which conveys rights, title, et cetera, for construction of a 4-bedroom dwelling on Lot 4, which, as Tom pointed out, is being sorted out with Planning Board. 310 CMR 10.584 D3 clearly states that notwithstanding the provisions of 10.584 D1 or 2, the issuing authority shall allow the construction of a single-family house, septic system if no sewer is available, and a driveway on a lot recorded before August 7th, 1996, where the size or shape of the lot within the riverfront area prevents construction from meeting the requirements of 10.584 D1 or 2, provided that A, the lot can be developed for such purposes under applicable provisions of other municipal and state laws, and B, that the performance standards of 10.584D are met to the maximum extent feasible. In difficult siting situations, maximum extent of yard around the house should be limited to the area necessary for construction. Given that the property is considered a buildable lot, has met the provisions under other state municipal state laws, and can be developed to not only meet but exceed the performance standards of 10.584D3, we feel that leaving the lot in its current existing undeveloped condition is not practicable and substantially equivalent economic alternative, and therefore it's not the preferred alternative for this project. Alternative 2 is redesign the scope of the project to eliminate any proposed alteration within the riverfront area and buffer zone. Is currently designed, as I pointed out, the total area of proposed alteration is 4,994 square feet, of which 2,098 is structure, including house deck stairs, and the remaining 2,896 square feet, plus or minus, is comprised of septic, retaining walls, walkways, driveways, and clearing for construction or limit of work. The buildable area completely outside of the 200-foot riverfront area and buffer zones total about 2,800 square feet. So if you consider the ratio of square foot of structure to square foot of alteration, to fit a house into this area, the maximum square footage of the house would be under 1,000 square feet, including house deck stairs, retaining walls, walkways, et cetera. That only takes into account state and local wetlands regulations, not any other municipal regulations such as zoning, setbacks, or other provisions of municipal or state law, which would likely further reduce the actual building area outside of the riverfront and buffer zones. According to the information provided by the Town of Falmouth Assessor's Database, we have a list of abutting home sizes in the Peninsula Point Association. 68 Ostrom Road, which is Lot 5, is a 3-bedroom, 3-bath with a finished area of 2,569 square feet. 60 Ostrom Road, Lot 6, is a 3-bedroom, 4.5-bath, finished area, 3,568 square feet. 72 Ostrom Road, which is Lot 3, is 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths with a finished area of 2,145 square feet. And 89 Ostrom Road, which is Lot 1, is a 3-bedroom, 4.5-bath with a finished area of 3,442 square feet. So the average finished area of the existing homes within the Peninsula Point Association is 2,931 square feet. The finished area of the proposed home to be located at 70 Ostrom Road is 2,808 square feet, which is under the average existing finished size of surrounding homes. The proposed home size is well in line with the character and property value of the neighborhood. Reducing the size of the home to less than 1,000 square feet in order to remain outside the riverfront area and buffer zones does not meet the buyer's goals of rebuilding a home large enough to provide adequate space for their family, nor would the size of the house be in keeping with other homes currently existing in the Peninsula Point Association neighborhood. As discussed in Alternative 1, this project, as proposed, can be designed to not only meet but to exceed the performance standards under state and local wetland regulations. Therefore, redesigning the scope of the project to eliminate any proposed alteration within the outer riparian and 100-foot buffer zones is really not a viable alternative, as it is not practicable and substantially equivalent economic alternative to the proposed project with less adverse effects. Finally, Lot 3 is the redevelopment project as proposed. I think we've gone through all of that. The proposed project will redevelop the lot in keeping with the character and property value of the neighborhood while meeting and exceeding the performance standards under state and local wetlands and other regulations and laws. Will better protect the lot through the cessation of poor management practices with an appropriate management plan for invasive vegetation, regenerating native vegetation, and restoring a diverse plant community and wildlife habitats. We therefore believe the project as proposed is the most practicable, substantially equivalent economic, and environmentally preferable alternative, and therefore is the preferred alternative for this site. That was a lot of information, and so I'm happy to answer any questions about the proposed management plan, alternatives analysis, or any of the other information I provided.
Okay, Teresa,
Yes.
thank you for the alternatives analysis. You probably should have started out with that because this board should not be reviewing a riverfront project until we go through the alternatives analysis.
Okay, my
You
apologies.
did cite one incorrect regulation, though. 10.58D, 4D3, it shall allow the construction of a single-family home, but that's only notwithstanding 1 and 2. You can't just skip to the regulations we like.
No,
So-
I,
No, I know.
yes.
So what I'm gonna point out in 1 and 2 that you need to comply with,
Yes,
that you can comply with,
yes,
and 3 says if the lot restricts you from complying with 1 and 2,
Right.
then they shall, but you can comply with 1 and 2 on this lot.
and we do.
Yeah, not really. So I will get to that. So I have a few questions.
Sure.
And we can go back and forth all day.
Okay.
But one question is, how much square footage is in the buffer zone to the coastal bank? In the resource area buffer regulations under Falmouth Wetlands Reg?
445 square feet.
And how much mitigation as required under are you offering?
The entire 100-foot buffer zone A to the salt marsh and coastal bank is being naturally vegetated and will remain in a naturally vegetated state.
It's not naturally vegetated because it's pretty clear, right? So you're ceasing mowing and allowing the vegetation to regenerate.
We're allowing vegetation to regenerate in the area where there's regenerating vegetation. So here's Zone A.
Yes, I
Here.
know that. So Zone A is not, it's not naturally vegetated right now. You're proposing to allow it to grow up.
We are proposing to cease all of the disturbance that's currently happening in the area, as well as to replant all bare areas, so areas that currently have no vegetation regrowing in them, we are proposing to replant, as well as allowing all of the vegetation that has been cut and mowed to regenerate within this area.
The board has ever allowed an area that has been cut to just regenerate to satisfy the mitigation requirements in their regulations. So we're gonna have to look at that one, okay?
I have to, I might be able to see that. How many square feet is being planted in zone? Tom just asked me how many square feet of planting is being done. I will have to calculate
You have
that.
102 shrubs, and 33 of those 102 shrubs, which is 30% of them, are 1-gallon sweet fern, my favorite plant. So.
Provide important wildlife habitat value. I know we might have a disagreement on.
But when you were given your presentation, you also said that there's huckleberry and blueberry that grows naturally in that area. So I would like to
Correct.
see more of that incorporated.
Yes.
So, I mean, you only have to, if you have 445 square feet, then you should be providing the other 9, you should be providing, per their regulations.
Yes.
That everybody in the town follows, 990 square feet of mitigation. And then afterwards, we're gonna discuss allowing the rest of the area to grow up, because you
So-
are working in a riverfront area. And the riverfront area regulations may allow a house, but you cannot exceed 5,000 square feet. Again, you can't just jump to that 3 one because it fits the narrative. How much area is proposing to be mowed annually?
All the area
Square
outs-
footage.
I don't have the square footage off the
Well,
top of
we're
my
gonna
head.
need that square footage, because that's going to greatly exceed the 5,000 square feet that's being allotted in the riverfront area. So, the way it works is the area is disturbed, you're gonna have to replant the areas disturbed, or, you know, you get 5,000 square feet. Right now, you're at 409, what is it, 400?
4,400.
Well, there's 4,994 square feet of alteration within
you
the
have-
200-foot
you have-
outer riparian zone.
6 square feet of wiggle room to play with, right?
To meet the 5,000 square feet, yes.
That's this. 3 by 2, that's pretty much what this is. So that's what you have for the construction of the house. And then you want to continue to alter the area that was illegally altered by mowing it. So you see what I'm saying? So what I'm saying to the board is the riverfront areas are very strict. 5,000 square.
Grassland is cut.
Yeah, 5,000 square feet of alteration. That does not mean that since the area was previously altered, that can remain in an altered state. Okay? So that's gonna have to be looked at. And we're gonna have to comply with FWR 10.18 with the 990 square feet of mitigation. Other than that, So I don't know how the plan in its current form exceeds the regulations, because in my mind, it does not. The Vista pruning corridor done after the house is constructed?
Correct,
Yeah, okay,
yes.
okay, that's fine.
Yep.
And, the alternatives analysis, you guys did what we asked to do. You went and compared the neighborhood,
Mhm.
so it was a little beefier than the original alternatives analysis, so I do appreciate that.
Okay.
Just start off with that, because the board can't consider a riverfront project unless they consider that you've met the alternatives analysis
Understood.
criteria first. So it's like kind of that, the way DEP has explained it to me is we have to go A, B, C. We can't
Mhm.
just go A, B.
Yeah.
You know, we have to go step by step when you're looking at this type of
Mhm.
project. So, there is a provision that we could require a wildlife habitat study if you want to push the issue of the mowed grassland. But, you know, I'll let the board discuss that. But in my opinion, the house is disturbing the 5,000 square feet, so the rest of the riverfront area needs to be undisturbed. And to continue to mowing an area that has been unpermitted or illegally altered over the years does not fit that definition. That said, the board, Tom is right, this project does need to go back to the planning board for clarification of which lot in the subdivision is going to be allowed that 4-bedroom. In speaking with the town planner, you know, it just has to go through its process, but that is a lengthy process. Has that application been filed yet?
No, it hasn't.
Okay, okay. So, I mean, my recommendation to this board would be not close the hearing until we get a determination
I
from the
just wanna
planning
speak
board,
to
because that's usually where
Next.
everything starts. Did you get a spec on is there a proposed wall? Did we talk about a wall last
Mm.
time?
It's on the page 3 with the septic system.
You did,
details.
okay, thank you. And you added the wetland restriction numbers?
Yes.
Okay, so I think we just have to wait on planning, and the board needs to determine whether or not they agree with the alternatives analysis, or you do want to see a reduction in the size of the structure, and whether or not, I mean, you do need the 990 square feet of mitigation planting. That is pretty standard. You've been very consistent ever since that regulation has been in effect to require every applicant that comes before this board to provide the mitigation. And Teresa, I would like a square footage on that mowed area, because
Yeah.
I don't believe that meets the Riverfront Act.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
And I mean, you're working with what you have to work with out there, so.
Right, which is actually, this
And
is,
it's a beauty, you know, I get what you're saying, I've seen,
Yeah.
and now it's like that, but let's kind of close that in a little bit more, please.
yep,
Because you're basically creating a big outdoor space where the riverfront area is a very protective standard under the state.
understood.
Okay.
Could I just speak to one comment regarding the 890 square feet versus allowing to regenerate? So oftentimes when we're doing these kinds of projects, we have lawn, for instance, that we're proposing to remove and replant with 890 square feet of vegetation. In this particular case and on this site, and if you've all had an opportunity to go out and see this site, we have really unique plant communities out here that are healthy native plant communities. So if the ultimate goal here is to protect the resource area, to encourage native vegetation, local ecotypes, local genotypes, is to dig that up in order to put a commercial plant in the ground, it goes against what I do generally as a restoration designer and ecologist. So in the areas that we're proposing to allow to regenerate, these are areas that have been cut and mowed that still support a significant amount of native vegetation that really just needs to be managed properly. Immediately the mowing needs to stop, the cutting needs to stop. The vegetation needs to be allowed to regenerate. If that's allowed to happen, and if it's managed properly and monitored properly to make sure that the invasive species that have been introduced to the site and encouraged to spread through the disturbance and the dumping don't take over, then this site will regenerate naturally on its own. So that's the reason why we're not proposing to plant additional woody vegetation in areas other than those areas that don't currently support any vegetation at all, that are just bare soils. So that's the thinking behind that. I completely agree and understand. So the grass area that we're calling, open grassland is a mix of native grass species. So it's mainly Deschampsia flexuosa, Carex pennsylvanica, Eragostis spectabilis. It's all really good, healthy native, as well as Gaultheria procumbens and bearberry, which I know the commission does not like to see as a plant proposed for mitigation purposes, but it's a native plant that's inhabiting this site and growing beautifully throughout. So we're just proposing to maintain that edge, but and not do any more disturbance on this site than is required in order to protect it and protect the riverfront area. I'd certainly be willing to, of course, as well as the Osgoods would be willing to plant more, to remove any references to mowing the open grassland area. We think there's a benefit from diversity and wildlife habitat perspective to maintaining a bit of open grassland area. We think that's one positive benefit of the ongoing management that's been happening on this site. But we could certainly look at that, but just something for the board to consider. We understand that FWR 10.18 requires that the mitigation be planted, at certain ratios, but this case, I think, is something different. The same way we feel that the tree replacement requirement of either 22 trees or 222 caliper inches, and we have done the plans that show these areas. We're not presenting them tonight for a couple of reasons. One, there's a significant amount of regrowing native oaks and pitch pines on the site. The second reason is that the Osgoods are being they're very concerned about not wanting to block their neighbors' views. So the area that's been currently mown, the neighbors at number 68 are located right back in this area. This area that has been mown and has been maintained is clearly within the vista area for that particular house. The Osgoods are trying to be very sensitive to the fact that all of the trees that would have to be replanted, and if we were going to replant 222 caliper inches, I'd gladly show the board what that looks like. Every single square inch of this area would have to be planted with 1 to 2 inch caliper trees, which doesn't make sense for the site. But however, we also have done plans where we replanted or replaced the trees 1 to 1. So 22 trees planted within this area. The Osgoods have asked us to, and asked the board to consider allowing the native trees to regenerate so as not to come in and immediately disturb and immediately block their neighbors' views. So that is something that they're trying to be considerate of.
And the Osgoods know that if they're going to allow the trees to regenerate, they're just going to turn into little bush trees unless they're managed properly.
Unless they're managed properly, and actually.
And that's a long-term
It is a long,
monitoring. Okay, I got
yes.
an idea for you, Teresa. If you're
Yeah.
really married to this regrowing and you really think that this is going to work,
Yep,
and we need to have the requirement of that 990 square feet, I'm throwing this out there and the board can consider it, then put the 990 square feet in where your mowed area is.
we could do that.
And then you'll have to come up with a really lockdown monitoring to prove to us that this works.
Yeah,
But you're not gonna get away with not putting the required mitigation in. But if you feel strongly about not putting it into that area, put it into the B buffer zone, the mowed area.
we could absolutely
It'll
accommodate
protect
that.
it, and then I want a strict monitoring protocol done
Yes.
by you,
Yep,
okay? Because you're presenting the project, you feel strongly about it, this is gonna be a long-term,
yes,
managed,
yes,
project.
Yep.
Then I could consider that, and then that mowed area, it gives you the opportunity to close in the mowed area.
yeah. And I think this is an important time to point out that I have been working very closely with the Osgoods and explaining this plan as we go along. They are very much about being good stewards of this property. They're particularly attracted to this property because of its secluded native vegetation, its wildlife habitat, the birds, et cetera, its wooded feel. So I have been in close contact with the Osgoods and discussed what this kind of management will mean for them
Okay.
long-term.
Okay, so, and I don't know if the board's gonna agree with me, but if
No, I
you're
understand.
saying that it's gonna regenerate and all the natives are gonna come back,
Yes,
if it's managed properly, then the 990 square feet go into that light green area that's not hatched,
Gotcha.
okay?
Yep.
And that'll help you close in that area and won't add an additional. I don't know if the board's gonna agree with that, and then it'll protect that area, okay?
Yep.
I mean, this,
Excuse me,
you know,
Jen. You'll get the opportunity after everyone else is done, the board is done. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, that's an option you can explore with your client.
Will,
So I'm not
absolutely.
saying that it has to go there, I'm saying that's
Yeah.
an option for you to explore,
Yes, I agree.
and one that I possibly could get on board with.
But that the board has to.
Yeah, the board has to
Right.
decide, and you guys may not agree with me, so I'm just trying to throw out a helpful
Yes, thank you.
idea. And that's it, Mr. Chairman. Unless, Kevin, do you have anything? Did I? Okay.
Courtney.
I just want to focus on one thing, and that is, and I'm not sure whether this is your design, Tom, but I like the idea that instead of dry wells, you're using leach pits and leaching chambers for your dry wells. My concern about dry wells with roof runoff, whether they're something as elaborate as this, which is a hell of an improvement over a regular 2-foot dry well with 4 feet of stone around, is the same issue that, all the junk that comes off of the roof ends up eventually will go into this nice system, which is gonna cost a lot more than some dry wells, and you haven't achieved the same thing. I'm wondering if you shouldn't, you're a very innovative guy, you shouldn't come up with some kind of primary treatment thing where there's like a sediment chamber that catches all the roof runoff and the leaves and the acorns and all the other stuff that comes off of the roof that gets in there, that can catch that stuff before it gets into your secondary leaching. Number one, it's gonna cost the homeowner more money initially, and it will be much easier to maintain the thing, because you won't have to dig up the whole leaching pit. You can just open up the primary chamber, pump it out, and move on. And in the long run, I think you should give consideration for that.
Yeah, we do have that, and in the driveway runoff, we have a catch basin with sumps, but we could
Right.
move that down further to put a sump in a lower area, which would
Yeah, I mean,
facilitate cleaning.
it's the same principle as a septic system. You're catch the solids before they, and it just makes sense because it'll increase the longevity of this, and it's, because this is a good system. It's catching a lot of this stuff. It just needs that extra element.
Yeah. Could I say one thing just before, while I'm thinking of it? Just for the record, that 445 times 2 is 890, not
Did I
not
say 990?
990.
Sorry, Tom.
Just so it
My
doesn't go too
math
far
on the
into
fly
that.
wasn't working.
But it's still 2 times for mitigation.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Kevin.
Me? I don't know quite what to say, but it seems to me as though we don't have much to look at until we can figure out if you've got a 3-bedroom house or a 4-bedroom house.
The planning board will handle that.
Yeah.
And it might, the
They
planning
come
board,
first.
yeah, when the planning board might come back and say, this is the lot. And they might come
That's
back and
gonna affect
say,
the
this
septic.
isn't the lot, I don't know.
Everything else we can look
Yeah,
at.
Yeah.
we can handle as much stuff as we can, and then,
Yeah. Anything else?
No, that's all.
Maury?
Tom, could you show me the old ACEC line before the zoning board of appeals gave you the setback change of 25 feet?
Probably not. The zoning is, see, that's not mine. There, yeah.
Is it on your plan? It's on your plan, Tom, isn't it?
I don't,
I can, it just says,
as the line,
It
the
shows the
variance
new
approved by them,
Oh, is that black line the one approved by zoning?
what's called the building setback line, it's 25 feet landward of the flood zone. So if you see this, basically it's like,
you can just use a cursor, just show me roughly where originally the setback for us was,
For us?
for zoning.
it's, well, basically this line right here, from this, the closest extent of the flood zone to the new line is 20 feet.
Okay.
And the zoning setback is 50 feet, so it was,
So it was way up almost at the
Way
very,
up,
by the
yeah.
garage, okay.
Yeah.
All right, the house didn't get any smaller since the last time we saw her, am I correct?
correct.
Okay. How are you gonna protect actually, I'll save that one I'll keep you up here for a second. Let's see, do we have a document for that 12-foot easement that has to be kept open?
It's shown on the plan. I am not positive there's a document for that. Well, there is, actually, it's written into each deed, I believe.
Okay,
Some
that
of the
they have
deeds that they have a
access
12-foot
to that?
easement.
Okay, just submit
I
that
think-
to the file.
I think, for instance, Lot 5 has a 12-foot easement to go across there. Maybe they all do. I can
Okay.
look that up.
Only because that's a lot of open area left, 12-foot wide to walk on. You know, if it's just somebody made up an arbitrary, 12-foot to go down, but if it's a deed, then that's fine.
You see,
but-
they're not it's not being used because there's,
Open grass.
it's vegetated. Most of that
Yeah, it's
easement
all
down here is
vegetated.
vegetated.
Yeah, okay. The drainage, Tom, is only 2 foot off the limit of work, and you said you're gonna strip out to suitable soils. How are you gonna do that if it's, a 2-foot overdig isn't, 24 inches isn't much. Like the,
24 inches.
I know,
So
I am concerned,
that's, I'd have to look at the,
that's not even a bobcat width. It's like a backhoe width.
right, if they put it below, and I'd have to look at the,
And we don't know what the soils are, because we don't have a septic permit, so we don't even know if it's.
it was submitted, the septic plan, and
Oh, it was?
should have
All right, I apologize, I did not.
I think
See
I
it.
have that.
So is it
printed here.
sandy? Just tell me, you can just tell me.
It's sandy, there's
Okay,
if it goes below, it doesn't have to meet the same criteria for
No, as a
septic as being
septic, right,
stripped
just have
out.
to
I'm
perk.
saying it go into the sand layer, I don't expect they'll,
More.
if it's sandy, I'm fine with that. It's just then you worry about the,
Collapse.
that you have collapse,
Yeah.
angle of repose with sand, so. It's just, usually we like 10 feet, off of everything around the house, and it's just, it's really close.
1,000 square feet.
And then, now, maybe you could answer this. There were comparisons for the other houses in the neighborhood, for their size and how it, is in keeping. Are these all in the riverfront, and did they all get variances to the ACEC for setback?
not all in the riverfront, no. I think
So
there's
there's
one
not-
other,
That's apples and oranges
I
then?
think I show, hold on, I'm sorry. There is a page in the alternatives analysis that includes that information.
not apples and oranges, we're comparing the other houses.
This, right, it
in
was
the
based
area
on
in this
size.
development.
So you can see
Well,
there's
sort of, but this is in the riverfront, and I think then I think you should have only used the analysis for houses in the
So-
riverfront that
There's
were the same size, not
si-
everybody's house.
60 is in the
No,
riverfront.
houses that are equivalent to the neighborhood.
Well, I'm looking at it as equivalent to the environment, which is the riverfront.
Right.
And, I'm not gonna get into it, but that's just my opinion, that they're not the same.
So,
You have a constriction with the riverfront, other houses did not.
so
I have
60,
one on mine that shows the
right.
regulatory area.
right, and I didn't include that in, so 60 is obviously
wouldn't
within,
that one
that house is compared.
Restriction?
Mhm.
This one would.
Yeah.
So that would bump it
Yeah,
up.
but they gave us like 7 different ones, and now just one is in the riverfront. So that one, would be a comparable, a comparison to me.
So,
I'm just one board member.
no, understood, and I think I was responding to the commission's concerns that the house was much larger than all the other houses in the neighborhood and was not in keeping with the character of the
25
neighborhood, so
square
that's
I
why we
think that was
provided
a-
that information.
Somebody in the audience had asked that. I have more concern about the riverfront than the size of your house.
GIS, now this is the GIS showing the regulatory setbacks, which actually,
Sound like it.
I wish this were correct, the house we're proposing is not in the riverfront area according to the town GIS,
Mhm.
but this number 60 is upstream here, so if that were to go back further, the difference is that the riverfront is measured 200 feet back from the annual high water line, which in this type of habitat is the edge of that wetland.
Well,
And so going that distance back would put house number 60 almost entirely in the riverfront area.
riverfront. Yep.
But that's the only other one.
I,
That's-
I did look at that, and that's why I was asking that question. I thought there was only one. Okay, so now for Teresa. The ACEC is we have 2 very special places in Falmouth, the DCPC and the ACEC. One's in West Falmouth, and one's in Wacoit. I think that myself, looking at this, usually you come in front of us that you want to use herbicides and blah, 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 blah. I think, my opinion, is that in this critical area, there should be no herbicides. And we used to, as a board, we wouldn't allow them anywhere, and then they just started to infiltrate. This area is very sensitive,
Yes.
and that's why it has a special layer of protection on it. And mowing in the ACEC and using herbicides, I think, is a little stretch. How are we gonna protect the salt marsh? In your narrative, you say there's a proposed walk down there, but I only see, and then the walk doesn't go any further, it just kinda stops there. You're gonna walk through that meadow?
Well, it stops at the property line. So we're showing the path leading, so just giving them access to the edge of the salt marsh. There are currently several paths that lead just to the edge of the salt marsh on the
Yeah.
property. Those paths would be allowed to naturally revegetate, and then we would just propose to maintain one path,
So
just
what's
to
a
the
path
edge.
to? I mean,
Just
is
to
it-
just to the edge of the salt marsh. Literally, at this
Salt
point, you can walk right down to the edge of the salt marsh between the Phragmites. That somebody put down, there's several pieces of plywood down there that
Saw
somebody
those,
laid
yeah.
on top. Those would be removed. The Osgoods they're not looking for access to the water or anything across this property, but it does seem to make sense that they would like to at least be able to access their property and walk to the edge of the salt marsh. It's a gorgeous view down there.
Okay. Then, one of the things I noticed on your planting plan, that where you're proposing new plants, they're in areas where there's already trees. Like the one up by the house that has the 8-inch oak and the 8-inch pine, and then you shoved all the plants right up against it. Why wouldn't you spread them?
That's just in the area where the shed is being removed. So if you look closely, you'll see.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, so we're just planting where the shed and deck are being removed.
Well, I understand it's gonna be bare, but they have tree roots and everything else there, so.
Right.
I'm just saying, anyway, okay. But you did it in other places as well. You did it right down near there's an 8-inch pine, right on the hash mark green by the blue. And then over here, there's I can't even see what size oak it is because it's so small. and I'm hoping it doesn't have an X on it, but the one
No,
that's-
none of these, nothing outside of the area where the house is proposed is proposed for removal. There's no trees proposed for removal on the site, other than the 22 trees that are required to come down within the limit of work. There's no other tree removal proposed at all.
And square foot, how do you mitigate? And that's it, and if I find something else, I know I had a couple more for you, but I'm gonna let Betsy take over.
Tom? I know Maura mentioned this, but didn't we ask for 10-foot workspace around the house? And a smaller house?
There is, as I said, there's 10 feet everywhere except around some of the
Except where
steps
there
and some
isn't.
of the deck.
Except where there isn't.
Except where there isn't.
Right.
Well, that's, you know, if the 10 feet has to do with maintenance activities or whatever, then I think it's,
It also actually has to do with your 5,000 square foot.
right, but you don't have to, we don't have to go 10 feet out just to stay within the 5,000 square feet. What I'm saying is for, you know, the steps there, there's no foundation except probably a small sonotube for the steps, and steps and the deck actually help maintenance. That is, having the deck as a platform for setting up ladders to go higher up. And so I think as far as the maintenance part of requiring that 10 feet around is not so important around where you have a deck.
Right, well, the point that I'm making is, that was a nice alternatives analysis, but it didn't throw in the alternative that it could have been a smaller house.
Yes.
Just pointing that out. So, that's all I have for you, Tom. Teresa. The Phragmites you mentioned in the salt marsh, is that on your client's property?
Some of it, I believe, is on the client's property. We are not proposing to remove the Phragmites reed as part of any management on this property. It's going to remain. I think one of the other benefits of this, and certainly there's a lot of research about Phragmites and its ability to provide peat and be integral part of salt marsh retreat.
Well, you know,
So,
there are several schools of thought on that.
I know.
And I'm on the opposite school.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm not sold yet, but I'm interested in hearing the research and learning more about the thinking
A
behind
biodiverse area,
is of greater value.
much greater value.
I understand. I'm not proposing that we're saying that we're going to leave the Phragmites for that reason. It's just an interesting development in people's thinking about Phragmites that we've been following. We were not proposing Phragmites management as part of the invasive species management on this property, mainly because the entire area has Phragmites in the transition zone between the salt marsh and the upland area. If we were to just remove Phragmites on a small portion of this property, we could certainly do that if the board felt that that was an important part of the invasive species
It would be
management.
something that
Yep.
your client maybe could work with neighbors who
Yes,
have it. And have-
agreed 100%.
Because we've had several successful projects in town.
Yes. Yep, I agree with you 100% on that.
So, let me tell you what disturbed me about this plan,
Okay,
in that you mentioned that there are various trees that you're gonna allow to stump sprout, that you're gonna manage them. But those trees aren't on here. So we don't have any sense as to what this community might look like.
okay.
And I would be a lot more comfortable if I knew that there were a lot of trees here, and then we planted stuff in between the trees. But as it is, it looks like a big bare spot to me.
Okay.
It's trees and shrubs, Teresa, in your hatched green area, right?
There are, and, like I said, some of them have been mowed. There's bayberry right now that's only a few inches tall, because mowing just stopped within the past year.
But if you could kind of indicate that,
We could.
it might make us
Yes.
a little more
I think
comfortable.
we could, there's so many trees in there and so many sapling-sized trees, we could certainly go in and flag and locate. It would be a huge undertaking and probably expensive for a surveyor to go out and locate each one of them. I don't know for sure, but we could certainly attempt to
Well, the thing is, if
do.
there are a lot of seedlings all growing up together, management might remove some of them.
It could,
Right.
and we actually, we had discussed potentially thinning up to 20% of some of these, and we felt that that's something we would wait to do and come back to the commission later and see what
After
grows
what grew
back
up.
on its own. Yeah, exactly, after a certain management period.
So, the other thing is, with the way, the way the regulations read, it's creeper tree, or
Or
caliper
caliper inch.
inch per caliper inch, or somewhere in between. So, I would like to see a lot of additional trees put
Okay.
in.
We
I
can
mean,
show
this-
you, yeah.
I'm, as you know, I like rivers.
I know you do, very much, yes. As do we all, yes.
And would like to see riverfront areas protected.
I agree, yes. Yes, we can certainly show you, I did not bring the alternatives that showed the 222 caliper inches of trees or the 22 trees.
We would not want 220.
It wouldn't make sense, of course not, but I,
Unless, as somebody suggested, I don't know if he's here in the audience today, who said he had to put big trees in.
yes.
Courtney's all for using helicopters and putting in
And I'm
30-foot
all for
trees, but-
reducing disturbance, so, in undisturbed, in areas that, where there's not major soil disturbance, I'm not about bringing in trees with helicopters that require, a hydraulic machine to come in and dig a hole in order
Right.
to get a tree in.
But I
So,
think-
I think there's a medium, like, there's a middle ground that we
Middle
could
ground,
find.
but I do think when you replied to Jen, we don't want you to be digging out, you said, you don't want us to dig everything out and then put everything back in.
Right,
We don't want you to dig
I-
everything out.
I
You
know that. Yes, I know that.
We don't even like you to dig lawn out when people are putting
Right.
plants in.
Right. And in this particular case, because these are not lawn grasses, which is another thing, there's really no, in areas where we propose to remove lawn to plant, it's because we've got velvet grass and other cool season European pasture grasses that get weedy and grow up. And in this case, we really have a lovely, warm and cool season native grass community in this area.
Again, I love native grass communities,
Yes,
but this is a buffer to the riverfront.
Yes.
That's why we have the riverfront area.
understood. Yes,
I think, Teresa, there's a way that you can keep the elements of the plan that you believe in,
Yeah,
and then still comply with our local regulations.
absolutely.
And by doing that, it's gonna help you reduce the amount of disturbance you're gonna have on that,
We can absolutely
get
do that.
to that 5,000 square feet without having to do any additional work.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, understood.
But I'm gonna drill that 5,000 square feet into everybody.
We agree,
Okay.
and we have, and as
So
Tom has pointed out,
we're giving
he
you
worked.
options, and
Yes.
we're giving you some wiggle room to work.
Okay. Yeah, I understand, and I think this is, yeah.
Anything else?
Jamie's gonna be happy to hear that I'm done for now.
We'll be back. Russell?
Just a quick question for Tom. Can you just give me an explanation on the cobblestone gutter? How's that constructed, and does it terminate at this sump, this 24-inch sump? It's very hard because of all the lines on here.
It's, cobble gutter basically are probably two rows of cobbles, one up straight and the other laying flat. So it's just like a little curb and a bottom to the swale sort of, so the water will run without
Direct the water.
eroding it.
Okay, so it just washes out onto the property then, and it's not tying into the subsurface stuff?
No, it goes in, so we have a catch basin. Let's see if
Almost like a swale.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, but I didn't know if would it terminate, and just splashed onto the property, or? I see that H20 sump.
I have this, little catch basin right here, so the water running down will be caught before it gets into the real driveway area, but they can go around. At this point, it goes off of the driveway, and this is a little bit of lawn area
No.
to catch the remaining bit of water into this inlet before it goes down. But this inlet would be right along that gutter, let's call it, and that gutter then goes into, so we have this retaining wall right here, so that cobblestone edge will and at the retaining wall and keep all
Gotcha.
the water up on the site.
Okay, I just had the same concerns Courtney did, about such a nice system. Didn't want to see it get messed up with all kinds of stone and everything else getting stuck in there. Okay, that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think most of the questions have been asked and answered. I will withhold any further.
Peter?
I have a couple of short questions. Could you, Tom, could you explain the innovative septic system?
So we're not proposing one, but that's the nitrogen reducing, innovative alternative.
So,
It's the Board of Health, whatever term for
so
denitration.
this project is not proposing
Correct.
an innovative septic system. Okay, the next thing, how many square feet of lawn will the project end up with? The reason that I ask it is that the zoning definitive plan decision limits it to 2,000 square feet.
Right. This is, I haven't even, to me, it's such a minimal amount, I haven't even calculated it.
So it would be
there's a-
less than 2,000.
Yes,
Okay.
that's part of there's a small area up here. Along here would be some lawn, and then there's a front yard, a little bit right here. Down here, of course, all the lawn will, at the time of the subdivision was approved, there was no such thing as the nitrogen reduction bylaw, the zoning bylaw.
Okay.
So anything now have to be no sprinklers, no irrigation, only natural fertilizer, drought-tolerant plants, but
long
still,
as-
it's less than 2,000.
Okay, good. And the final question is, did you ever get the perk test report?
Yes, that's on the
Okay.
page.
Okay, no further questions.
Thank you. Susan?
No further questions.
Okay. I'm going to open it to the public before we go for a motion.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna.
Yeah, right.
Sure.
All right, any further discussion from the board? Okay. Any comments from the public? Can you state your name for the record, please?
Bernice Mandelbaum. Just because a lot of the trees are likely to be required by you along the riverfront, that is my view. And I just wanted to say that by retaining 25 feet of view for them, I will have none. I'm just here to say that I understand that we purchased this for a fair amount of money with a view, and I understand your concerns as well. We knew there was a lot there, but if you could be sensitive to our needs, that would be extremely helpful.
Do you have a Vista corridor?
Yes, we do. We're at number 60, and we are that house that's also in our house would not have been built at all, because we are within the ACEC. We are on the river. But, I still, it is what it is. We bought it. It wasn't necessarily my choice. But it was what happened, and I'm just hoping you'll be sensitive to the fact that it's extremely likely that the measures you will enforce will obliterate the view from my home.
Can I
And
make a suggestion?
Yes.
So I'd just suggest that you work with Teresa and not have all the trees right in the middle of that pathway.
well, if you're allowing a 25-foot view vista area, maybe we can split it in some way or something. But it's inevitable that, my property's on the riverside of that development.
Right, but I mean, you can
She's
stand,
right
see
here.
what their view would be, and don't plant all the tall trees right in that place.
I mean, I think that that was one of the reasons, and I think if we look at, in the alternatives analysis, this page here, you can see this is 60, and this is 70. So anything within that area, I believe, is the area of concern.
Right.
Which is where the trees would have to go. So that's all. And that's one of the things that the Osgoods were trying to be sensitive to.
Thank you.
Good evening. Arlene Wilson, A.M. Wilson Associates, representing the Downings, who are at 68, the house that is landward of this particular property. Many of the points I was going to make have been touched on, so I'm going to try and skip around a little bit. Relative to the tree removal, it seems to me that whatever the applicant is proposing here, if it doesn't meet Regulation 18, it needs to have a stated variance under your regulations, although a lot of this discussion may amount to a variance. If indeed you were going to consider allowing stump sprout management and seedlings grow back, that's not just a long-term management problem, it's a very long-term management problem. In order to get those trees back to having a similar canopy area that, as the trees that are coming down, which are quite mature, we're talking about 15 years. Something well beyond the ability of the commission to require under a normal order of conditions, but maybe you should consider requirement to obtain a copy of a contract for long-term management with the landscape architect here or the mitigation specialist, and to have money set aside in a special bank account to pay that person. As somebody who is a professional in the field, some of these things have a tendency to fall apart after a few years. People get tired of paying those maintenance fees, and there will be no way to ensure that that would continue to happen if you decide to allow that kind of seedling resprout to occur. The comparison of the other house sizes, not only is there an issue of there only being one of those houses in the riverfront, but there's an issue of the shape of the lots. The other lots are much more regular in size. The area of upland, usable upland, are bigger and more useful. They're not squeezed in by odd geometry. So the comparison of the house sizes is a little disingenuous. Furthermore, this house is going to have a full walkout basement, and the area of that basement, as far as I can tell, has never been added into the gross square footage of the house. So I think the number that you're seeing is short by something between 1,000 and 1,400 square feet. The alternatives analysis, there are a couple of us in the room here who are old enough to remember when the riverfront regulations were being drafted and adopted. And the idea that a single-family home, single-family lot only needed to look at that lot, and that the alternative needed to be economically viable, that was really intended for somebody who already owned the lot at the time the regulations were adopted. In this particular case, the applicant doesn't own the lot yet. And so his or their economic alternatives are a little wider than being stuck with trying to develop this particular property. So the alternatives analysis, I think, falls short. In addition, they talk about needing a house big enough for their family. I'm in grandmother mode now. Some of you may be as well. If they have children or grandchildren, or will have, having 10 feet around the house of usable space, that's barely enough to put a lawn chair in. They're going to have big areas of grasslands if the management plan is adopted. It's a sure bet that those areas will wind up with a swing set, play structures. Not that most people should be restricted from having those things. Certainly my grandchildren have enjoyed them when they were a little younger, but it means that the area that's going to be used around this house is going to be more than the not quite 5,000 square feet that they're talking about. And finally, there really is no proof that this lot is buildable at all. One of the things that we've tried, we took a shot at calculating the area of upland on this lot. This is kind of an odd situation because the subdivision was approved, the areas were calculated on the original subdivision plan, and then there was a recorded correction. But the areas of the lots never changed on the corrected plan, although the distances and bearings around the perimeters of the lots did. So when this subdivision was approved, there was a requirement for 45,000 square feet of upland. Wetland was then defined as vegetated wetlands. It didn't include coastal banks or any of that. What you see before you is the area of the lot that purports to be upland. The smaller graphic shows the little piece of wetland that actually comes out of that. There's a tie line that was used for computation purposes that includes that little sliver of wetland. Even if you calculate the area to the tie line, you come out with a little bit less than 45,000 square feet using the corrected lot perimeter. The wetland area is probably another 150 square feet or so. So they don't make it. They never made it. It seems to me that in addition to going to the planning board, they need to go to the ZBA for a second variance for not having enough lot area. Now, it's been a long time. Nobody's ever caught it. It may well be that the Zoning Board of Appeals will grant that variance. But that's another process that's going to take 3 or 4 months. And they have to go through it in order to prove that the lot's buildable. So I would suggest that instead of continuing this for a couple of months or 4 months or whatever, that the commission allow the applicant to withdraw without prejudice and refile when they have all of their other permits in hand and can prove that they really have a buildable lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, any further discussion from the board? We're looking at a continuance, we have a date. Are we looking at a continuance?
I don't. It's up to Tom.
Yes. I think we had discussed it, and I think there's probably, going to the planning board, at least for the bedroom issue, for filing and advertising and that sort of thing, and 1 or 2 hearings would take close to 2 months, so Jen and I had discussed that, and being not, probably there's no last week in December, or rather November, I mean, Thanksgiving. Next,
Fourth.
probably the next one where we could get things in a row would be December 4th.
That's what you're requesting?
Requesting that.
At the request of the applicant, make a motion to continue to December 4th.
To second.
We have a motion, we have a second. I'm sorry.
I seconded.
We have a motion and a second to continue until 12/2?
12-4.
12-4.
12/4.
10
No,
seconds.
okay.
12/4. I have 12/4.
Yes, ma'am. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a minute, everyone to clear out.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wait a minute, what do I have? Okay.
Wanna take a break? Take a 2-minute break. Okay, we're back. We're still under continued hearings under
You get
notice of
it.
intent.
She has to announce she's raising.
Next up, Warren Family Irrevocable Trust, care of Philip H. Warren and Susan Warren, trustees. And for the record, our new member, Susan Warren, has recused from this hearing. 132 Sitters Pond Road, Falmouth, Mass. For permission to construct and maintain a fixed timber pier with associated ramp, float, pipe piles in Sitters Pond, and to install dug-in stone steps with lighting for the existing path.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the applicant is requesting to withdraw the application.
Oh,
Second.
It just, they're withdrawing it, you don't have to do anything.
I wonder where Mike was.
All righty.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
no, we don't have to
We don't have to do anything,
We
eh?
don't do anything.
So she didn't really have to
What are you
leave.
gonna vote, not to have them, like, tell them they can't?
They can't.
Somebody should tell us.
Wait a second, we need our,
Peter, would you
Member
be
back
so
in
kind
again.
as to tell Susan? Oh, I'm sorry. Got it.
Okay.
Withdraw, I don't need this anymore.
That explains why.
Oh,
It's on our
geez.
agenda.
What do you think? Madeline Road,
Nice to know.
Is that what she was gonna
not so
withdraw?
Fagan.
I don't think I'm on this one. I didn't think so.
do you want me to give you the form for this one?
I didn't like
That's,
this
you
one, and
need
I
to
wasn't
read the
even on
form
it.
for this one.
Courtney,
Hold on, can I read it first?
I'm sorry.
Next up, Scott and Nyla Lutz, 109 Madeline Road, East Falmouth, Mass. For permission to raise, R-A-Z-E, and rebuild the existing structure to include upgraded Title V septic system, new driveway, rebuild the dock, mitigation plantings, invasive species management, and all associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping. Quorum, please.
Courtney, Kevin. You with me, Susan?
Yep.
Betsy, Jamie, Russ, Steve, Peter.
Mr. Tavaz, you're up.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I hope to be shorter than the last one. And I hope I can avoid the ire that I created with the board last time. We've worked very hard at this project. We had 3 issues with this that have been all corrected, with one notable exception. We took this to the Board of Health immediately after we had our meeting. We got on the Board of Health, as you know, they have a rule about notifying abutters, et cetera, so it took a while. And last Monday, I met with them because the designer of the septic system was on vacation, actually, and gave me the plan just before we left. So subsequently, there were some changes made. On the septic system, but it was approved. And we had 6 variances that we were requesting. We had a very irate neighbor, a butter to the north, who was a new neighbor, and thought little of our septic system. So we moved it once. You're seeing the first move. The Board of Health saw fit to move it another 5 feet and create the necessary 10 feet from the northerly property line. And they cut down the number of variants requested by 2. So we went from 6 variance requests to 2. And they passed the system. Now they're requesting a new plan. My designer is on vacation for 2 weeks. We'll be back and we'll have a new plan. I've discussed this with Jennifer at a meeting, and it seems to meet the requirements. The Board of Health is pleased. I hope you are. We will make the necessary changes within a week from now. And this is the plan. I think you have it in front of you. This is the area down here where the, if I know how to improve the, I'm just trying to blow this up.
At the bottom.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you. It's a very atypical system. And those are the variants that were required. This is Scott McGann's own handwriting as we went through it. The signature of the designer, Linda Cronin. She's on vacation, so when she comes back, we will straighten this out. Another thing that came up is we've had so many iterations of this in our work that there was some inconsistencies with the step arrangement in Linda's plan, the front step arrangement in Linda's plan, the driveway arrangement in Linda's plan. She took it from the first iteration. It hasn't been fixed, but guess what? When we fix this septic system, we'll adjust all the others to conform with the main plan. So that being said, I hope that satisfies the board. This is probably the worst thing that we have here. We were asked to do a professional foundation and pier plan. So we have both of those here. Worked on by a Wellfleet engineer. We have a foundation with breakaway panels. All the calculations are shown. He also chose his own entryway here, which is slightly different. We're going to put that in texture, in context with the original master plan. I'm going to call my plan a master plan. These steps are exactly the same. Everything else here is the same. There's a slight difference in these front entrance. But he has breakaway panels. All the calculations are shown in this area. Steps down from the deck. The deck is at 16 feet. Linda's plan also showed a deck at 15.3, so we're adapting that change on Linda's plan when she gets back. So, that being said, this is the steel concrete panels that go onto the foundation, and this is the pier arrangement that you had me change from a frost wall with piers to just stanchions or piles with the steel arrangement as well. So we hope this satisfies the Conservation Board as well. Let's see. I do have this plan colored. And it's a little bit more readable. We created a table. We included the driveway. We didn't include the driveway. I was trying to compare driveway 1 and driveway after, or driveway before, driveway after. So we went through and gave credits for all the pre-existing conditions on the plan here. And we came up with a slight credit for what we're doing with the new house and the new steps and the new front entry and the cantilevered AC unit, which we have right here, and the proposed driveway. So we have a slight credit, no mitigation is required. However, we went in here and according to, I think, 10.18, I think it's 8A that you were referring to earlier about a lot that's degraded and that needed, not mitigation, we're not going to call it mitigation planting, but we're offering 461 square feet of buffer adjacent to the BVW, along the edge of the BVW, all the way down. We have a list of plants and their quantity. They're mainly grass plants, panic grass, blue stem, and we have some high tide bush. They all exist. So, and beach grass. So it's a low herbaceous planting with the high tide bush being the only woody plant that's in here. So clear, I think this is a little bit clearer to see where the proposed house is, the panels that are in here, the dock, the alignment with the Falmouth wetland, the 25-foot setback is here. The shed, I have to make a note on a new revised plan for the board that says the shed is to be removed. It is up in the table as being a credit because we are removing the shed. There's a new configuration for the driveway, and the area was given up above. Unfortunately, this plan also reflects the second iteration of the septic system that was changed by the Board of Health. So that system has been moved another 5 feet south, and it conforms to the 10-foot setback, so that variance went out the window. I think this meets all the standards that you were looking for and that were lacking before. I need to do a revised plan. Another question that was posed by Jennifer was a stamped plan by a registered land surveyor on top of my plan, and I have that. So I can give that to you when I don't need it, right after that. So we need a stamp plan, we have that. Remove the shed has to be put onto the plan. We're gonna propose dry wells, which I missed on the first go-around. And a shower is gonna be installed, but it's gonna be installed under the deck, so there's no more coverage in through here. And I have to put a limit of work. This, we had a nice meeting Tuesday afternoon. So this all came out of the meeting. I think we're meeting all the requirements. I'd like to close the hearing, and hopefully get a positive vote based on another revised plan, both from Linda for the septic system and from myself. I'll turn it over to you.
Wayne, did
Yes.
you get your plan stamped before you put all your revisions on them?
Yeah, I mean, you wanted a stamp plan. You'll have another stamp plan afterwards, sure.
Trick question.
Okay. There were some inconsistencies that I pointed out to Wayne. We needed the PLS stamp. Septic plan doesn't match this plan. The first floor elevations on the septic plan don't match this plan. The septic system has been redesigned or pushed over. I mean, there's a lot of little revisions that need to be
I
done.
don't want to close this hearing until we see the final plans.
Where do you stand with Scott? What did he say about the variances?
He said it was approved. The plan is approved, but he needs to see the finished plan.
Let's go to the board,
What's that?
the Board of Health.
No, he doesn't have to see it in the Board of Health. He just needs a revised plan. Doesn't have to go back to the Board of Health.
It went to the Board of Health already.
It has been to
The
the Board of Health.
variances?
Yeah, we met last Monday, that's what I was saying, a Monday ago, 9 days
Basically,
ago.
Scott made him shift the septic.
Sorry.
And because it's a basement with the flood vents, they're not considering it a habitable space, so they were able to shift it closer. It is a 2-bedroom system. He did say that it's, even though systems are designed for 220, this one's offering 284, it's still considered a 2-bedroom system. It will never be a 3-bedroom system, and he thinks it's just better if the sewage has more of a, how did he say it, a larger place, larger dispersal area. But he was pretty adamant that, he's gonna really seriously look at the building plans, and this is not going to be a 3-bedroom septic system. Now,
So would that be deed
the
restricted?
Board of Health, and
Gotta
he
put a deed
also did
restriction.
explain that assessors, building, Board of Health, all view bedrooms differently. So,
But we need
But-
that revised plan.
I need the revised plan with the shifted does your master plan have the septic shifted?
No.
No?
It
Okay.
shows it in the same location, because I moved it with her. She moved her other stuff with me, and things didn't move accordingly. But
Yeah.
we're gonna change it to the master plan. My master plan is exactly proper, exactly right, except for the septic system, which needs to be relocated. So, that's the overall plan. We were told it's a little confusing. We went through the dock, we went through the foundation, we went through the piers on Tuesday. We went through the inconsistencies. They can be straightened out. That's not a major item. Septic, unfortunately, Linda's on vacation. She will be back at the end of the week. You'll have this a week from now at the latest. I don't think I can add any more. Trying to keep it simple. If you have any questions, please.
If you put in the drywalls.
I do have to put in the drywalls, that's what I was saying.
There are a number of little revisions that do need to be, the plans need to match.
I'd like to see them.
Okay, that's up to the board.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see them. There's so many little plans, like what you just mentioned, little things. I'd like to see the plans with everything the way it's gonna be.
Want to cover any questions or comments now, Lou?
Yeah, I don't have any other question.
Okay. Maura, you're not on the quorum, right? Kevin?
No, you know.
Oh, I have a question.
As always, I agree with Betsy.
I have a question.
Jeebus.
Wayne, where are the utilities coming in?
Utilities, right now, he's got overhead. right
No,
here.
water.
And the water gate is right there,
Where?
right here. I'm pointing to it,
Okay,
okay?
where?
So the water gate isn't changing, but of course, the line will come out. They'll stub it back, and then they'll put it brand new into the house.
A brand new line, so it'll be like underneath that stair.
Yeah, right underneath that
Okay.
stuff, right in there.
You show that on your plan.
You want to show that on the plan?
We have chapter 91?
We do have the chapter 91.
We do?
Yep.
Is there gas on the street?
No, he doesn't have gas here. I think there is gas on the street, though, to be honest with you.
Are they planning to use natural gas?
Sorry?
Are they planning to use natural gas?
No, not that I've heard of. No, but I'll ask that question. I'll ask about all the utilities, actually. He should go underground with the overhead wire as
Yeah,
well.
obviously, it has to go underground, so we'd want to know where.
Okay, all the utilities underground. I wrote a note to that, sure.
Jen, do you guys have any concerns with the dock? Do we have a chapter 91?
We do have a chapter 91.
The mooring fields?
Is the mooring field indicated?
No.
It's not on the plan.
Wayne, put the mooring field on the dock on your revised plan too, please.
Mooring field?
Yep, it's basically where they're gonna dock the boat. So
Oh,
put a
okay,
little
I see
boat
what you're saying, yes.
outline.
I do have it on the
Next to the dock.
cross-section. I have it on the cross-section, I don't have it here.
Yep.
Right. Russell? Steve?
No questions, Chairman.
I have a procedural question for Jen.
Yes, sir.
If the applicant promises to deliver a up-to-date revised plan, and when it gets time for us to vote, and the applicant has closed it so he can't answer any questions, if we have a question or concern about the revised drawing, we could reject that application.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, if the applicant chose to continue it to have a revised plan and discuss it with us, that would be his chance to explain anything.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Once the hearing is closed, any discussion of the plan or the project is considered a violation of the open meeting law because the abutters and concerned parties are not able to participate in the hearing. So once a hearing is closed, let's say a lot of times, an abutter will send a letter to you guys. We're not allowed to have you look at it because it's considered a violation of the open meeting law. So we will take any correspondence we receive after the close of a public hearing, put it in a sealed envelope, and put it in the record.
So, in this case, the applicant is kind of taking a chance
Correct.
that
If we closed it.
he
Yep.
will have all the plans so that we won't have any questions or concerns.
Correct.
No further questions?
Thank you. Susan, you're not on the quorum, I'm not ignoring you.
What are we doing? Is he proposing to continue it, or is he want us?
That's, he wants to see the
Is he
plan.
proposing to continue, or what?
I would like
Pleasure.
I'd like to save time for this commission. I think we have done our due diligence here. We feel pretty confident that we can meet these criteria. There's a $75 ticket every time we bring in a revised plan. We certainly want to avoid that. We think we have met the letter of the law. We have a lot of small, not even delicate issues of consistency between three plans, which we can solve. And I feel confident that if I close it, and Jennifer gets back to me and said, Wayne, you got everything, you got 9 out of the 10, but you didn't get the 10th one, we'll come back with a revised plan to satisfy that. And I think, I haven't.
No,
We're not coming
no.
back with more revised plans, Wayne.
Okay.
No.
It all has to be
All
done,
right.
like, and and I'm gonna tell the board, because the board, you guys have worked with us for like 15 years. If it's a small, minor change, we have no problem doing it. We have recently received guidance from the new circuit rider at DEP, and I will forward that email to you. They really are recommending not closing hearings and having revised plans get in. And I don't know what triggered that, but that's it. But I mean, if this board wants to see it, but Wayne, if you're missing one thing,
Yeah.
you know, you have to give me another revised plan. That's putting a lot of work on us and you, and, I wanna ask you one quick question, though. Did you investigate the stuff that he removed, the junk vegetation?
Yeah,
That you
went
called
down-
it?
I went down, there was a.
And where was it?
Scrub oak.
Okay, where was it located on the plan?
Right in this corner.
Okay, can you replace the scrub oak that he removed illegally on the plan, please?
They don't grow scrub oak commercially,
Oh,
but.
I'm sure on your revised plan, you're gonna come up with something to put there.
Okay.
Okay, so I would fill that little corner in with vegetation. All right, thank you.
Now there's need for another meeting. Okay. When can we meet again, if we choose to continue?
16th. Right?
Yeah, that's 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, 16th. Let me see. Ooh, what do we got going on the 16th? Yeah. Oh, that's not bad. 16th would be fine.
16th.
Does that give you enough time?
Sold. What?
Does that give you enough time?
Oh, yeah.
Is
That's 2 weeks.
Linda gonna be back in order for you?
Linda's back on the weekend, this weekend coming.
Okay, so she can get that septic plan done by Wednesday, and you can get everything into our office by Wednesday, including having your plan stamped by, who does your plan, Steve?
Steve,
Yeah.
Yeah, the new one. Okay, so you don't want this one up to date, you wanted the new one?
No, well, just give me the clean one that he has, and that's
Okay.
fine.
I've taken all the notes, and thank you
So
for.
you need a PLS, you need to match, reconcile all three plans.
Right.
What's what's his name? The structural,
Varnum, yeah.
Varnum.
Yeah.
Philbrook,
Philbrook.
thank you. You're gonna change the first floor elevation on Linda's plan, because she's got the
Yep,
deck 7 inches
15.3,
lower
yeah.
than the first floor elevation of the house.
Yes.
You're gonna show the utilities coming in, you're gonna move the septic on the master plan, correct?
Master plan and of course her plan.
Yeah.
To
You're
reflect
gonna
her
add your
plan.
dry wells,
Add the
you're gonna
dry wells.
add your vegetation in the corner,
Mhm.
you're gonna put the mooring field on the plan.
Mooring field on the plan, yes.
Yep,
Got all these notes, sure. Sure.
Jen, is
really should
a
do the
land
depth.
surveyor required?
Yes, actually it is, and I can explain that to the board after. A land surveyor is actually required if you are shooting anything off a property line, and that is guidance that comes out of the assistant director of the DPW, who holds a dual license as an engineer and a land surveyor. It's actually a state regulation.
You can't survey an engineer can't do a land survey.
Yep, so he is advising us that all of our plans need to have a PLS stamp on it.
Including this upcoming one?
Yes, correct.
Could we have the depth at where the boat's gonna be moored also?
It is on there. It's like 1, 2,
Mm-hmm. It's not much.
right there. It's underneath his little A.
I couldn't see it, sorry.
It's because it's underneath his little A. If you could just make that a little clearer, Wayne, that'd be perfect for them.
Okay.
Okay. So
Did you
you've got,
request-
That's on the cross, are you talking the cross-section now?
no, this.
Okay.
plan.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay. And I covered up another thing here, so I can straighten that out as well. See it? 1.2.
And just to go over, Wayne, you said that once you remove that little wall, you're not gonna have to do any grading over there, right?
No grading, no,
No grading, so you're gonna take that little wall down and do no grading?
no more, none.
Okay.
This one here, this one here.
Request of the applicant, I make a motion to continue to October 16th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for continuance. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wayne. Just for the board.
Oh.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I assume I should ask them.
Jumping in.
Thank you.
I have a series of questions, and I'm not sure, maybe I can start with a few, and if you want me to come back on the 16th, I can do that as well.
Go for it.
So my name's Carla Usalis, I'm on a butter across the street, so not on the northern side, but on the eastern side. And I guess my primary question and concern with this new plan is, why is the house being moved down into, it's like 2 feet beneath where the existing house is? So yes, it's staying within the allowable building envelope, but now I would say your average elevation above sea level is about 6 feet with the new foundation, whereas with the old foundation, it was like 8 feet or more. So why are you moving it southernly?
With regards to topography, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it seems like you're moving it more into the flood zone is kind of odd on this property, so it doesn't exactly adhere to the topography.
This line here sort of dictates the house has a 25-foot.
No, I appreciate that.
Wayne, you guys have to share the microphone for the record, please. Sorry. And use the,
The line of the Falmouth wetland 25-foot setback sort of dictated where this would go. So it sits in the middle of the lot. It's comfortable as far as the separation from the septic system. There's a lot of moving pieces in this, and that's how this all came about. So as far as topography, it's also, the septic system is moved further from the top of the coastal bank than this way. We just call it juxtaposition. You're moving the house this way and the septic system up. It's the furthest point, 91 feet from the wetland. It's also the furthest point from the top of the coastal bank. So it's not necessarily an issue of why we place the house. It's why we place the septic system, the house, and allowing a driveway, all those things.
Okay, well, if we don't need variances because it's not a true foundation, then your house doesn't have to be moved south. So I'm not quite sure if I understand that argument. The only variances you need for septic now are the 91 feet from the buffer, or from the wetlands, and then from the street, and from the neighbor, which you apparently have appeased that. So there's no variance from the foundation. I can't understand the logic, because now you're moving downhill, you're moving closer to the neighbor's 30-feet high cedar trees, so you're restricting the view. And the grading also concerns me, so I'm not sure.
The owner had
Well-
particular interest in time. The owner took particular interest in time and went out and looked at this whole site, and that's how it came about. So part of this is physical, part of this is administrative. This is not a thing of gaining more view, obviously, that's what you're saying. It's a particular way of siting a house. There's no rules to siting a house, but I'm giving you a couple of the reasons why we did what we did.
Okay, well, I just want to point out on the map. So as the neighbor across the street, there was the gentleman that lived here for like 40 or 50 years, and he was often ill, so I'd go watch his house while he was in the hospital or nursing homes. And I would just take pictures of whenever it would flood. And I have seen it flood on many occasions in here and then down here. And it just seems odd that you're moving the house downslope so that it floods just in a nor'easter. I'm not even talking about a hurricane. I just think you're opening yourself up to trouble. And complicating that is the grading. So it looks like you're adding 2 feet of fill to the front of your property. That's what, according to your site plan, you are. I'm not sure how to move this. So down here, this, I believe, is the original 8-foot topography. I think this is the proposed grading that you're proposing. It's 10 feet, so you are adding 2 feet here.
No, there's 9.5. There's a point grades here, 0.4, 7.2, there's a 9 point something here.
Well, I'm just talking right here, right? And we already know that this is an issue with drainage, right? So now you're adding 2 feet of fill.
No, we're not 2 foot of fill, no.
Okay, so,
We're adding 2 foot of fill probably over here in order to grade this. This area does drop off right at this spruce tree.
I'm just reading your lines on your chart. So, okay, so maybe this is 1.5 feet of fill right here. Your driveway is now 3 cars wide, which I thought Falmouth regulates it to only, the curb cut can only be 24 feet, and I thought driveways had to be 5 feet from a property line. So there's the questions I have around that, which perhaps we can't answer now, but we have that drainage issue because this backs up. The DPW still hasn't addressed it. This is where the water pools naturally, but now by building this hill up, you're gonna be diverting water elsewhere. I'm just concerned that this house is gonna change the flood flow. And being, I'm not sure if that's been thought through yet. And perhaps it has, but it has not been articulated to me in any way that I can make sense.
It's a town issue.
Okay. The water all pitched in from the road. You can see the contour out of the road is 10 feet. We're just trying to make it fairly level, 10 to 10. So there is water pooling still in the front yard, but we can change the contour, or have changed the contour, so it pitches down the side of the foundation, and it pitches down the side of the other foundation. And in the middle here is an area that we have to carefully grade and put a high spot in the middle, which we would do with you can't do it with a contour, you have to do it with a spot elevation. And grading is done in the field in some cases. In this particular case, if you want, we can add this onto the plan and show positive drainage so that you can see that the water flows not in from the road. We don't want that, but from a high spot that's somewhere over the top of the septic system to the right and to the left, upper and lower and around the side. And I should show more spot elevations, but they were all at 9.4, 9.5. So you're right, it is going up half a foot in those areas. And we're trying to grade the driveway out so that it works a little bit better. I don't know this rule about 3 foot across with driveway, but that's how it fits in here, and we're trying to get 4 cars to park without exceeding the limits.
So you're gonna have to get a driveway permit from the, from,
Curb cut, you mean?
yeah, curb cut or driveway, yeah,
Sure.
driveway permit from engineering,
Okay,
so
okay.
I'm assuming.
Well, we have proposed, we have existing grades, they all mate, they work. We're not shedding driveway or site water anywhere unduly, we're not giving it to the neighbors. Or we're not changing the pattern of the watershed, I should say it that way. If you're increasing the side elevation, it's already pitched this way. We're not changing that much.
Not contributing to the problem either.
And there's no retaining necessary.
Well, my more important question is, how does it change the floods coming in? Because this is just the rain floods coming down, but when we get a big storm. On the foundation plan, you show the foundation being graded to 6 feet. But then on your dock elevation plan, you show the existing conditions at 4, so it would appear that you're adding 2 feet of fill to your backyard.
No.
Well, I'm just pointing out facts that I saw in your.
You can see the existing house, and I'll show the cross-section on the existing house. It was at about 4 at that time. You can see the 4 runs through this area, and now this is the existing grade. We haven't, this grade, we don't dare touch that grade. So we're at 6 feet. I don't see the problem.
It shows on your foundation plan that you're grading to 6 feet.
Well, if that's at 6 feet, then that's what we are grading to. You got me on that one. I have to look at my cross-section. Excuse me.
Wayne, you know you can't redirect floodwaters onto town property or neighboring
I
properties.
know, we're trying to contain it.
All the floodwaters
We-
have to stay on your
We're trying
property.
to contain it,
And
and
he's also not responsible for the road.
No, he's not responsible for the road drainage.
So if there's a drainage issue with that,
That's a
that
town
has to be
issue.
addressed with engineering.
Yeah, you can't put any drainage onto the road or your neighbor's road.
Yeah.
Correct. And the opposite is true.
He
that they
can't, he doesn't have to deal with the
his
road drainage, but he can't displace floodwaters or stormwater onto his neighbor's property. It all has to be contained on his property.
I still show it at 4, see that? Concrete, well, that's the old foundation right here, is at 3.9. We're not changing it at all. So, we're just running the same contour right in through here. I don't see any change. And if anything, it rises to what the plan says, which is 6 feet.
Right, and that's my point, is perhaps I'm beating a dead horse because you guys look a little glazed over, but I think we're changing significant grade in this house, and I just want to be clear that if we are, we are, and if we aren't, we
No,
aren't.
we're not. We don't dare change it out there. It is what it is.
Hate that saying.
What the heck? So, we show a 4-foot contour, unchanged, until you get to the side of the house. We have to adjust it to work around the new side of the house. We show a 6-foot contour right here, right in this area. And that's unchanged until it gets to this side of the house. I know, I do the grading myself. So if anything, it's raised because it is, this was 4 feet when it went into the old house, when he used to take the boat in on those tracks, and now it's actually up to 6 feet. It's up higher, but we didn't plan it that way. It's not for height, it's done for placement of these 3 items right in through here.
Okay, well, I guess you could still get to 8 feet or 9 feet if you move the house north. And I guess the other question I have is on the dock, because it looks like on your dock elevation plan, you're adding 6 feet of length to the dock. Has that been resolved?
We discussed that. It's actually, we
Well,
came up with within a foot when we put it together.
On the plan that I saw, that was included in the last go-around, I guess you submitted it last week, it shows I think it's 4 by 14, and then a 3 by 12 ramp with 2 sets of stairs.
Stairs go right on top of the fixed dock. That's a fixed platform.
I don't believe that's the way you have it drawn on the plan, though.
Didn't we measure this the other day? And come up with
Didn't
the
you say you were kicking it out because of the stairs, though? Because you needed to because of the stairs?
Okay, here we go. So we took this back and we started this at the same place that it was originally, from the plan. So here we have stairs that we're entitled to get onto this upper dock. That meets the 5-foot requirement that we discussed the other day. Then you need this set of steps to get back to this lower area. We measured this whole thing the other day, and I think we said 16 feet, you came up with 15. We were within 1 foot of the overall from the original interim accepted plan number 4273. So, and by the way, we are pursuing...
Your mooring field?
Say again?
I said, there's your mooring field.
Yeah, right here. Mm-hmm. That's what I was telling you, it's on the cross-section. You want to see it on the plan view.
Yeah.
Let me just ask a clarifying question, because I think it shows on here that this measures 12 feet, and this measures 4 feet. So how do you get any number that's less than 16? When you add in the stairs, which you have 10, I think you said 10-inch risers, and 10-inch risers on this side, and you have at least 7 or 8 of them.
There's not risers, no, those are treads.
Well, treads, I'm sorry, 10-inch treads.
The riser is
Right.
less than that, yes.
Okay, but,
Can you
so
get
if I'm adding 12 plus 4 plus the width of the treads, you're gonna stick more than 16 feet out into Eel River West. I just don't understand how the math works otherwise, because unless you're making this span shorter by whatever treads you have. So if this is 6 feet long, then maybe it works, but 12 plus 4 is 16, plus this, plus this.
We just looked at that. Now we gotta get another one. This is 12 because it has to be, it was given in the original doc. It also gets us over the salt marsh and allows us to walk not on the salt marsh, but on the,
You have any issues with this?
Well, it's supposed to be in the footprint of the Chapter 91 license. And I think what the abutter is saying is that she believes it's extending out, and what Wayne and I were looking at, and I don't know if, I can't remember if we added in the stairs the other day, did we, when we were talking?
we added the overall. We took the
Yeah.
ruler to it, I remember. And
So we did from one end,
She's right, it's 4 plus 12 is 16 plus,
plus the risers,
yeah, which are 3.
which are what, another, if they're 10-inch, they're 60 inches, that's 5.
Well, as it's shown here,
5
it's
feet?
3 feet.
How many rises?
But some part of that 5 feet is landward. So when we looked at the plan view, we measured from the Chapter 91 license, and that Chapter 91 license measures from that rock wall.
Oh, from the
rock wall is gonna be here, the landward risers are going this way onto the thing.
Well,
So
then
when
it's
we looked
15 or
at the.
16 feet.
What?
15 or 16 feet.
Yeah.
So it complies, I mean, it's within the Chapter 91 license.
I don't understand, this is the wall that we're talking about.
Yep.
So this is 12 plus 4.
Yeah, and that little section is, what, 30 inches larger,
no, it's 3 times 10, 2.5 feet.
2.5 feet.
Mhm.
It's gonna get it that much into, I mean, it's 2.5 feet. The configuration has to be the way it is because of the requirements by DMF and, Chapter 91, so it's gotta be above 5 feet. So he's gotta have those stairs in there. So
That's
if
the
it's
difference.
pushing it out, it could be pushing it out 2.5 feet. I mean, that's gonna be for the board to decide. It should be in its original Chapter 91 configuration, but they can't construct it like that.
Right.
These are new requirements. from the
Yes, they
state.
are. They're forced on us by the deed, number one, and then it was confirmed by DMF in a letter, and also by Division of Waterways. And Division of Waterways,
He's reducing the walkway to 3 feet, so he doesn't have to go 6 feet in the air.
right.
Comply.
Well, the
Chapter
orig-
91 is gonna push you, Chapter 91 is gonna make sure there's 5 feet of clearance or stairs
Mm-hmm.
to allow for the lateral access, and DMF wants a 1 to 1.5 ratio to protect the salt marshes.
If it's on
So,
the coast? or
It
what?
is kicking it out about 2 feet, 2.5 feet.
and you get a second better.
It's gonna get it in, I mean, there's only 1.5 foot of water there. Any little bit of extra water we get is.
Division of Waterways has a second bite of the apple when you go for the permanent license. They have the right to say yes, no, whatever.
When's the last time you saw them say no?
So, they just said yes to 2 of my dogs, yeah, they
so-
did. Yeah.
But I mean,
But they
yes,
configured them, they reconfigured
technically,
them.
it is kicking it out. Technically, we'd like it to stay in its Chapter 91 configuration, but it is getting it in
Gotta
deeper
comply with the
water,
other.
and the board has made provision like that before. Because it's getting in, I mean,
the
I don't
rock,
know,
yeah.
I mean, even if we gain a 1/2 inch of water, it's something.
Yep.
Out there. I mean, there's no water out there.
We're complying with everything.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lynn.
Mm-hmm.
All right, sorry, one last question too, while we're on this chart. So this is velocity 14 right here, and you have the FF elevation at 16 for your dock? Isn't it? Oh, the deck, I'm sorry.
First floor of the house.
Right, but doesn't it have to be 16 feet to the bottom of the structural members? So your deck is gonna have to be above your finished floor of your house?
That's for velocity zone. Technically,
Velocity zone's what?
Technically, the house is
14.
out of the velocity zone.
And you add a foot
Read
there.
it.
No, building code adds 2 feet. And it has to be to the lowest member. Your first floor elevation has to have it. What is it? Come on, builders.
It's lowest structural member, is how it says it in the code.
2 feet.
Yeah, 2 feet above the lowest structural member. Is that for a deck though too, or is that just your first floor elevation? First floor elevation. So that's just for the interior first floor elevation of the house and doesn't include the deck, if that what you were asking, right? Yeah, okay.
All right, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wayne, is there a way to give us a plan that shows, without the house or anything, how you're grading? Give us a grading plan, just so,
Sure.
you know, without all the cross sections of your building, and get the hash
You mean
mark
clean
out
up the
of-
plan and just
Yeah,
give you,
get the hash marks out of that building envelope, and get me something without, like, very lightly with the house outlined, and get me the grades.
that's easy to do.
Yeah.
An
And
intro,
I
do
think
you wanna,
that could, you know, ease some concerns about the direction of the floodwaters.
okay, is that an interim plan or one to be presented at the 16th? Which? You wanna see that
See it. You present it so the board can see it, so they
on
can,
the 16th?
yeah,
Yeah,
so
okay.
get it to me on the 9th, so then we can see which way the water's gonna go,
All
okay?
right, perfect, I'll put
You
the
know what
spot
I'm saying.
elevations, I know.
Yeah.
I know, that's fine. Okay, great.
Thank you. So if you're gonna come back, you might as well submit that, and then that way, everybody can, you know, with the concerns will be addressed.
Okay, great. Good. So,
Okay?
have we closed the hearing? or-
No, we have not. We've continued it. Oh, yeah, I
I
think we
mean-
did.
Haven't taken the vote yet.
We haven't taken the vote.
So, are we good discussion-wise?
I'm good discussion-wise.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of continuing the hearing to 10:16, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
Okay,
Thank you.
hey, thank you.
Chairman, I make a motion to adjourn?
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Amy, I was waiting